All right. So, welcome to this special webinar about QF Test 7. These are the highlights you should know. So we recently released version 7 of QF Test, and in this webinar, I brought some of my colleagues, and we are going to show you and demonstrate to you the most important new features in QF Test 7 in the first part of the webinar. And afterwards, there will be a chance for you to ask your questions, and we will have a short Q&A session. So we've got a lot to talk about, so let's dive right in. I'm going to share my screen and show you the most obvious new feature of QF Test 7, which is our refreshed look and feel. So what we have done with QF Test 7 is we've gone back to the drawing board and revised some of the colors and the look of UI elements in QF Test. So the first thing we've done is we've chosen more modern gray tones for our backgrounds and to make it look more at home in modern operating systems. We also adjusted our default font on Windows systems to better align with the operating system. And we have also changed the spacing between elements to have more clarity in the user interface. This is really obvious if I, for example, open the settings dialog, where you can see all of the elements have just that little bit more space, which is maybe not obvious if you just look at it, but if you hold it next to the older version, then it's really obvious how much of an improvement it is. We have also increased the size of many icons so that it's easier to see at the first glance what's going on in your test suite. But the most important new thing, of course, that we have introduced with QF Test 7 is our new dark mode. We can trigger it here from the View menu. The default is to use the system setting, which is the mode of your operating system, but you can also always use the dark mode always. And this is what it looks like on macOS. So this is a really big new feature, and it's not just an aesthetic thing. This is also for accessibility. There are many people who work in dark environments or in workplaces that require applications to be available in dark modes. And now this is possible with QF Test. And you can try it out anytime and see if you like that, if it fits your IDE or whatever you're using besides QF Test. But we also have added some new features to our UI, and I just want to show you one example. So we added a feature where you can hide labels in the tree that are redundant with the icon. So if you're an more experienced QF Test user, you can go into General, Editing, and then you can toggle Show Step Types for named tree nodes. And what this does, let me first open a couple of nodes so that you have a better idea what's going on. What this does is it will hide all of the labels that are always the same, like test step, test step, test step, sequence. All of these labels that are not necessary if you know your way around QF Test, you can hide them now, and this makes the whole tree much more readable. Okay, so that's everything that I wanted to say briefly about our new UI. I'm going to now give the word to my colleague Sophia, who will show you some of the meat in QF Test 7, some real new features. And Sophia, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Max. So now you should see my screen. I will tell you about new concept of QFS label, the QFS label variants, and how to use it in SmartID, officially released in QF Test version 7. So let's capture something. This text field, for example, probably in new suite, like here, so you see what we have captured. Here, without chat, probably I see also something. Here we see, as we got used to, the QFS label with state should match first name, that's this label here. But to reach this in QFTest version 7, I had to change the default options. Let's look at option dialog. Now it's also new. There is an open SmartID and QFS label item in option main tree, and here is by default in version 7 record old variants. Let's make a capture again with this default option value. The same text field in new suite. And here you see there is still label first name with state should match, but it was recorded as QFS label left. It's label in the near of this text field and stays left from it. And it's not only one QFS label recorded with state ignore. There also label top left surname here, top left from this text field, and label tooltip. Let's see at some point. Well, yes, that's a tooltip of this text field. So it's basically the same label variants, label possibilities that exist in old QFS label algorithm, but you see in version 7, these labels captured explicitly. So, but it's important that is record option. So you have no problem with replay of your old components, with replay actions on your old components. I record a new action on the same component in the same test suite where I have already this component, and this component was not duplicated. It's important to know having the old components with QFS label, you use still old QFS label algorithm. You can update this component, for example, yes. And now you have here in your suite the new the component that would go through the new QFS label algorithm. So now let's capture a SmartID. Again in new suite, again the same text field. For those of you who probably not yet tried SmartID in preview version, let's look what do we have as a SmartID here. We got no components recorded. All the information that QFTest use to recognize the component is just here in this ID. It's text field with a name, first name. For those of you who have already tried and worked with it, it's changed a little bit. In previous version, you would have just first name recorded. It's still, you can replace still the old versions of SmartID, but the new version with a class recorded and with explicitly said that first name is a name of this component. Let's look at the component. So here it is, the first name is a name. It's more performant. What is if you want to capture the SmartID with something visible in user interface, but not with the names that come from HTML, from ID, or from name probably. Let's look at options again. There is an option priority for recording SmartID with qualifier. And I want to say here, cool label is more important for me. I would like to have label if it exists, then feature if it exists, and if nothing of label or feature exists, the name recording for SmartID. And let's capture the same text field again. So here we are, we have left first name, the label as we have seen before. What is if in my application such labels changes each release, but something what stays stable for this text field is toolkit? I can address the same text field also with a toolkit now, tooltip. I copy the tooltip from here, from the component recording. So, but it's pretty long, this tooltip, I would say. So it's here, it's recognizable, but it's too much for me. I want to make it shorter and use regular expression. Then I put this % sign to show that it's a regular expression. And here we are, it's still recognizable. The next, what I would like to show here, this is actually a dialog of our car config demo. And this is an example where these text fields have actually the same label. What if I want to address this text field, not this one? So I can use the nested SmartID for this case. I can say that I'm looking for a text field with a label first name inside this panel. I capture this panel to have a SmartID of it. That's it. And here I will put this panel SmartID. Let's transform it into input to make it more visible. So now we are addressing this text field inside invoice address panel. What if I want to work with many elements inside this panel? Then I can use the concept of scope instead of this long nested SmartID. Let's look how does it work. First, I will capture these text fields. So they are there, but I want actually this. Then I put here in sequence, in comment, doctext scope, put again the SmartID, put again the SmartID of the panel as a scope. Then I see here this scope icon that shows me that all these further actions inside this sequence are under this scope. Let's also write here in a name something. And now here I address already the text fields in this panel. So there are for sure more details about label variants and SmartID that you can find in manual, but these basics are already enough to start with these new concepts. Thank you for your attention, and your questions are welcome in the questions and answers slot.
Thanks so much, Sophia, for showing us the new SmartID features. Let's go into web testing now and take a look at our custom web resolver. So let me share my screen with you again. Here you can see our install custom web resolver procedure call, and every one of you who does anything with web testing will know this custom web resolver call and will have seen the syntax before with these equal signs and at and percent. And in QFTest 7, we overhauled this process to make it easier and more intuitive to edit a custom web resolver. Our goal with this was to make sure that you can edit your custom web resolver yourself without having to study the manual first or having to do lots of trial and error. Yeah, okay, so here you see the install custom web resolver call. Okay, so, and you can see also now this has a very thin line through it. So this is to tell you that you should not use this anymore because there is something better now. And where is this better thing? Okay, so what we did is you can do a right click on the install custom web resolver call, and you can transform this node into this shiny new install custom web resolver node. So let's do this right now. Okay, and now you can see I have the same information and the same configuration as before, but I have a completely different user interface. So what we have now here is similar to a script node. We have a text field with syntax highlighting. This uses the YAML syntax to display the data that makes up our custom web resolver configuration. And we also have lots of buttons in the toolbar and some other options. Okay. So what is the most important thing here? The first thing that you will notice is you can now see your entire configuration at a glance. You don't have to look into individual procedure call parameters and double click them and open them in a separate window to see what is going on. You can see everything at once and can scroll through the list. We also added the ability to natively add comments to your custom web resolver configuration so that you can make some complicated things more clear for anybody who comes later and wants to figure out why is this mapping here. Okay, but now you say, okay, I still have some quite complicated syntax here, it looks like. What can I do to learn how this works? And the thing is, you don't really have to learn how it works because we have added lots of functionality to help you with this. So for example, if you just want to create a new mapping, you can use the new mapping toolbar button and say, for example, map a generic class, and it will automatically generate for you a placeholder where you just have to say what you want. So for example, let's say I want to map some kind of combo box in my application. The HTML text is my combo box. And now, okay, what's this, your generic class? I would now have to enter the generic class of my component that I want to map this to. Okay, so let me think, what was the combo box generic class? Was it with a big B or a small b? Now with the new CWR step, we don't have to look into the manual to see all of the generic classes. We can go into this menu and just find the generic class that we're looking for. So we are in a form element, and here is our combo box. And now we have not just the combo box generic class, but all of the related generic classes for that combo box. And if I click it, I get a mapping for this combo box. Okay, let's just copy and paste this up here and remove this. And now I have my combo box mapping. And if I say, oh, I don't want to map an HTML tag, actually I want to map a CSS class, I can use this little edit icon to modify the configuration at the point where I am. And here you can see, I can do all kinds of actions. For example, I can add a CSS class to my combo box mapping. And you can see the mapping expands to show me both the tag and the CSS mapping. And now I don't need this tag mapping anymore. I could just remove it, but I can also, to be safe, remove it through this menu. And there I am. You can also access this menu by pressing Control Space anywhere, and it will give you the available actions at the current cursor location, so you can use the keyboard also to modify your configuration. Last but not least, we added some error detection and handling to the custom web resolver configuration. So if you ever write down something that doesn't make any sense to QFTest, your error will no longer be silently ignored. But if you try to install your custom web resolver, or you press the reformat button, QFTest will instead give you a helpful error message telling you what in your configuration is wrong and how you can fix it. Last but not least, we also made it easier to create resolver scripts for the cases where you can't do what you want to do with the custom web resolver syntax. For this, you can now go into the script resolvers menu, and you will get a drop-down with all the resolvers that are available in QFTest. And if you select one, let's say we want to do the feature resolver, you will get a new SUG script, which is already pre-filled with a placeholder, with a link to the manual section that you can refer to if you need more information. And you can just get right in here and add your own logic. Also new, your resolver scripts can live right inside of your custom web resolver step. And so you have everything together that belongs together. While we are here in this SUT script, there is also a general new script template feature. So every script that you have has this templates drop-down where you can choose from a huge range of different useful script types. For example, if you need a custom checker, you don't have to copy and paste the example code from the manual. You can get a template filled in right in, and you just have to change what you need to change and do your testing. Also cool is you can add your own templates to this menu by going to your user templates menu, to your user templates folder, and just adding any templates that you'd like. All right, this was the news about custom web resolver configuration, the new custom web resolver step, and the script templating feature. One part of this puzzle is still missing, and this is when you do your custom web resolver configuration, you need to look into your application, look into your HTML code and see, okay, what CSS classes, what HTML tag names, what attributes are available to me, what elements of my web page can I use to map them to generic classes. To make this more easy, we have created the brand new UI inspector, which you can easily open from the from the custom web resolver node and with the toolbar button inspector, for example. And now, because my client is running, I have got it hidden in my dock here. Because my client is running, I can now go through all of my windows and components in my client and see all of the individual items. I can use this button in the toolbar to go into inspect mode, and then I can click around in my application and select exactly the element that I'm interested in, and the inspector will jump there and show me what's going on with it. So immediately I will get the most important information, which is the label of the element and also the generic class. So I can instantly see if, for example, my custom web resolver mapping does the job that it's supposed to do. But I can also enlarge this info pane to see all kinds of information about my component that I would usually have to record a component for to see what's going on. And if I use the inspector instead, I can save lots of time when I'm just configuring my custom web resolver and just want to check my work. Or if I want to work with SmartIDs anyway and just want to take a look at how QFTest understands my component and, for example, get a SmartID proposal from the inspector and copy and paste it and use it in my test. I can even select another component and use the inspector to compare two components, and then I get the component information of two components at once, and I can see everything that QFTest knows about this component. I can always also, if I'm not working with the custom web resolver, I can also always open the inspector from the client's menu, open inspector. Or when you are in component recording mode, you can always right click on a component and say show in inspector to jump right to that component in the inspector. Okay, so this UI inspector is now available for Windows, for web and Android applications, and support for more engines is, let's say, planned. All right, that's everything that's new in the custom web resolver in a very brief way. If you want to learn more, you can always look at the manual, but we will most probably also have a separate special webinar later in the year where we will show you more advanced tricks and tips for working with the custom web resolver. But for now, let's continue with the next topic and jump over to my colleague Jan, who will show you some other new node types that we have introduced in QFTest 7. Jan, please go ahead.
Yeah, I am already sharing, I guess. So with QFTest 7, there were inserted 3 new nodes, which is the error node, the warning node, and the message node. And they are designed to replace scripts like rc.log message. So there's a log message thing you probably have, you may have used or not used till now. So in order to log an error, we, normally what was done till now was to simply write a script with rc log error and the corresponding error message. And now we can also use these kind of steps. We can also automatically convert them into the corresponding other steps, just to go through the different nodes. With the error nodes, we have an error node, we have a warning node, and we have a message node. Yeah, now let's go over the different attributes. The message that should be logged is the text up here. So if I open the run log, it will directly give this kind of information. Then we have the same arguments that we have in the script, so prevent compactification. So if you are using compactified run logs, you can tell QFTest to not compactify a certain message. We can say to QFTest we want to include it into the HTML report, but we can also say to QFTest that if this step is executed, we also want to add diagnostic log information to the log. The latest feature, so I will start in order to show it to you, because probably most of you are not using it, but so that you have seen it. So if I launch an application and I'm now executing this kind of step, it will also add some kind of more debug information to the log, which you can, which is mostly useful for support reasons. So we also have different options in order to create screenshots. So there's an option to create the screenshots based on, to always create an screenshots. We can also say we never want to create screenshots of, or we can say we want to create screenshots based on options. So whether depending on the options that are available below these kind of settings. So it will take into account the maximum number of screenshots per run log and so on, whether we should create screenshots of all client windows and so on. Okay, next thing I wanted to present is that there's a new way of saving. Probably you all know that QFTest, when it saves a test suite, it's done in XML format. So I will I will save this kind of test suite. And now if I open it in in a text editor, you see it's a simple XML format. In order to configure this thing, there are now new options which are below general test suites. And because most editors tend to open XML files with UTF-8 instead of reading out the correct encoding, we can now advise QFTest to use UTF-8 for test suite saving. So if I'm doing it like this, it will not change existing test suites, but in order for QFTest to override the XML format for existing test suite, I need to have this enabled. And now if I save it, I have an UTF-8 formatted test suite. You will probably only notice a difference if you have special characters like the German umlauts. So if I open them now, it was already UTF-8. Yeah, so this time it has already opened it as in UTF-8 format. But if the test suite editor would be the previous default, which was ISO 8859-1, you would know that it would display the characters differently. And if you would change it now, it would also be differently encoded as a format. So there would be problems afterwards. Exactly. So in order to facilitate this kind of things, you can now say to QFTest, please use UTF-8 for test suite saving. What you can also do is to change the number of indentations. So if you want to have a more compactified test suite, you can tell to QFTest, please, I want to have 0 indents, and then everything is 0 indented. There's another thing. The other options is the maximum line length. 78 was the default till now, but if you put that to a high number or a negative number, all indentations will go away. There's a way to automatically convert all test suite in a particular folder to your new to UTF-8 or something like that, so that you don't have to open it by hand, which can be used in order to, if you have a Git repository, to automatically convert every file in your content management system to the new file format. But you should do that in one go when you have the least branches, because it may result in much conflicts.
Thanks, Jan, for showing us the new steps and the news for the XML format. Now we will give the word to Plamen, who will show us the brand new Gradle plugin for QFTest. Plamen, you can take the stage.
Hi, nice meeting you, everybody. What we have done is we have enabled developers especially to create unit tests, and in those unit tests they can use a new API to start QFTest and to run tests. They are basically able to say which tests or test cases should be run, and this can be used as part of the build process. So I can imagine that for a branch or for a feature, they may create a unit test, which will actually execute QFTest tests, which are already available. And the whole thing is made pretty easy through our Gradle plugin. So if we Google about QFTest and Gradle plugin, we'll land on the integration with development tools web page, and then there is the JUnit 5 Jupyter. And here is the background, how the whole thing works, what classes and packages we provide, what are the requirements, like setting the needed libraries on the class path, and pretty much everything is done covered by our plugin. And through the plugin homepage, this is the dependency that you the plugin dependency that you can add to your configuration file. And the information about the plugin can be found on our GitLab page. And here in the README, there is a sample code, and there are some documentation about some parameters that are available to be set through the API. And one can always go in their ID of choice. In this case, this is any ID that supports Gradle, and I have IntelliJ. And you can see what the QFTest API here can offer. And I have created a small example suite, and I can run it directly from IntelliJ. This is actually also very good. You run the Gradle build, and the Gradle takes care to execute the tests. I will make this quickly. You may see that I have actually decided to not to execute the whole suite, but just the first test set, because I wanted to keep it short. And QFTest starts in batch mode. This means without UI, and the tests from this test set will be executed. And it's pretty clean. We don't see any output whatsoever. And after the tests are finished, QFTest generates, the plugin generates the HTML reports. And after the reports are generated, they will be opened in the browser. But this will happen only if we expand the command line with the attributes for the reports. So if I run the tests from here, it looks a bit different, and I assume that in your integration systems or IDs you will use verbose. So I can run it from my ID, from this command, from this method call. And you see I set here language. I set it to be to provide some errors, to produce some errors, and then to create the report. And as you can see in the console output, there is a really, in this case, it's easy to see what is going on. And I can assume that it will be also look like this in your integration tools. So we have two errors, and if I wait a bit, QFTest will generate it, and I will be able to see this immediately. This means that the developers that are actually working with the IDE, they can they know that this test set needs to pass, so they can execute it via the API and then see what went wrong, what could be the issue. And this is my test report. In this case, it's in German, but pretty much the same. Yes. The whole information, as I said, is here, but I always search it in Google, and I find the link for the plugin. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Plamen. All right. Now, before we jump into the Q&A part of our special webinar, let me quickly tease the next webinar that we will be doing to you. So on 19th of June, we will do in the afternoon the English version of a special webinar about software security. There will be some colleagues from our sister company, MGM Security Partners, and they will share their practical experience that they made in many hundreds of software projects about developing software securely and what to look for when executing what the weaknesses are and how you can test for security. So don't miss that. We will soon send out a newsletter with all the details. All right. So now, before we start the Q&A session, I'm going to end the recording, and I'm going to thank everybody who watched online for going with us, and see you next time.